Initial Thoughts is a spoiler-free movie review series. All opinions are my own. Hi everyone, welcome back to Initial Thoughts, a series in which we talk about films as and when they're released. Today's film we're talking about is Elvis, the latest music biopic, directed by Bahz Luhrmann and stars Austin Butler and Tom Hanks. So over the past few years we've had this new subgenre of film come really kind of to the forefront of film, and certainly in some of the movies that have been released in that subgenre. Things like Straight Outta Compton is the one that really sticks out to me as the start of this new craze, if you like, of these retellings, wonderful retellings when done right, of like kind of legendary music acts. Obviously Straight Outta Compton based on NWA, Bohemian Rhapsody based on Queen, of course, was probably the most and will probably still be the most acclaimed of the films. With obviously Rami Malek winning the Academy Award for Best Actor, it showed that these can really be told at such a high level and aren't more of maybe a gimmick film. Was kind of certainly what I thought when I first heard this. They were just making these kind of retellings of these great bands and great careers of music artists. I thought that I didn't think you would get the kind of quality that we did, and then we had Straight Outta Compton, which I thought was fantastic and really elevated maybe not elevated the careers of the people it's based on in that scenario, but certainly brought their music back to the forefront. And I think that's happened for each of these films, because although Queen's maybe its own entity, because Queen has always been at the forefront of music for a lot of people and never really dipped in popularity. But certainly the song Bohemian Rhapsody, went back into the local charts and really it maybe gave a new appreciation for a new generation of Queen fans. And then I think probably the best example of this was the Elton John film Rocket Man, who, and I'll admit myself, I'm not a massive Elton John fan, but coming out of that film, and while I do feel it was slightly inferior to both of the prior films, Straight Outta Compton and Bohemian Rhapsody, I thought that Rocket Man maybe had one of the better performances in it from Taron Egerton as Elton John. Maybe not as good as Rami Malek, of course, and wasn't maybe to that level, but with him singing all the songs himself, his own slight, variation of the songs. And that led to, obviously, again, what I was saying about repopularizing these songs. Things like Crocodile Rock, things like Your Song, things like Tiny Dancer. All these kind of legendary Elton John songs that obviously featured in the film, and then it led to a resurgence in their popularity. So obviously coming into an Elvis film, you would imagine that with it being already quite a strong subgenre film, and Elvis being, to this day, isn't that right? Still the biggest selling solo artist of all time, male solo artist, and obviously Elvis still has its popularity. But I would imagine that there's certainly probably 2 or 3 generations even that haven't experienced Elvis to the level of this exposure, this quality, this kind of forefront nature, because the posters of this film, the marketing for this film has been everywhere. It's not like this is a, quite unknown film or small film. You've got someone like Tom Hanks attached to the project, who of course is one of those great legacy actors over the last 20, even 30 years. So to have him attached to this, it's probably the best quality actor that's been attached to any of his films. You talk Straight Outta Compton, you talk Bohemian Rhapsody, and you talk Rocket Man. To have someone like Tom Hanks in this, already when I heard this film was coming out, and I thought, okay, an Elvis one, certainly there's the story to be told about his life, but also to have the quality of Tom Hanks, one of my favourite actors over the last 20 years, certainly. I thought, okay, well, they're not messing about then. They're seriously taking this to a point where they're probably angling for an Academy Award campaign for this film. So coming into this, I did have high expectations, and admittedly I didn't know, like a lot of everybody didn't really know who Austin Butler was. I came into Elvis certainly, I wouldn't say skeptical, more optimistic. Hopefully he would come in and be able to channel, obviously, Elvis himself in these songs, because obviously him doing the voice himself instead of what Rami Malek did in Bohemian Rhapsody, which was dub over Freddie Mercury's voice, and Rami Malek was never going to be able to echo the Freddie Mercury thing, or Freddie Mercury's variation or certain unique tang of voice. It was never going to happen. But for Austin Butler to be not only playing Elvis in this role, but to be doing the singing himself, wow. So let's talk about Elvis, the film itself. I'll start by saying a few critiques I have of the film. And that's not to say that's going to affect my overall score, or that's because I'm starting with critiques that means I hated it. But I'd rather be transparent and start with things I didn't like, because they were quite hard to look past, I'll be honest, in when it comes to overall rating time, and we'll get there when we get there. So for the critiques for the film, I have something kind of small, maybe is more medial of critique than the other big critique. So the first critique I have is, in this film, obviously it certainly should be an encapsulation of music of the time. You know, the 50s, the 60s, and maybe even into the 70s as the film goes on. And going through this legacy of careers. And obviously doing all these kind of soul and blue legends in the 50s, and country music, and all this representation of all of that, and obviously the integration of the inspiration of Elvis's music, and where it comes from, and where it's inspired from, and all these different things. One thing that Bahz Luhrmann as a director, or I suppose it's probably written into the script also as well, so I don't know who is really to blame for this, but something that I just thought was so out of place, and it was the real thing that took me out of the film, was they decided to integrate kind of modern rap music. And don't get me wrong, I'm not against rap music at all. I actually, I've just talked about how much I love Straight Outta Compton, so that's not the case. But I feel that if you're trying to be a time capsule to this time, you know, to this era that this is set in, and to have, you know, it sounded like Cardi B on a certain part of it. I'm not knocking Cardi B, but it's just, I didn't think that she's right for an Elvis film that's set in the 50s, 60s and 70s. So that was certainly maybe more of a minor gripe, but a gripe nonetheless. So that was something that certainly I didn't like, because I thought, and that's not a testament to the whole music and the music overall, but there was a few instances, I think it was twice or maybe 3 times, that there was this kind of modern rap / hip hop music integrated into the story, kind of just to show dramatic beats, and I thought, that's a strange choice, and it wasn't for me. Some people maybe, not for me. And the other critique is quite a big one-ish, and it will affect my overall score, certainly. The first act of this film, kind of 40 to 50 minutes of the first portion of the film, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that are important that happen in this first act, and there's a lot of things that I thought were wonderful, but overall the pacing issue of the start of this film is pretty bad in my opinion. And that's quite harsh, I suppose, and I'm sure maybe not everybody will feel that way, but I found that the first 40-ish minutes, I found myself actually getting a bit checked out of the film. Once we finally got into the kind of the meat of the film, and once we really got into the story being told, I just felt that the 40-50 minutes at the start were very weak and very unengaging, I suppose is probably the best word, apart from maybe 1 or 2 scenes. You know, there's the scene in the trailer that you'll have seen. He's in the pink suit, he's in the, you know, it's kind of his first performance. That's in this first kind of 40 to 50 minutes. That's a great part. That's a great part, and I can't wait for you to see that part. But aside from that, I think the first act of this film is pretty... It's not a mess, and it's not like it's incoherent. I just think it's unengaging. It doesn't... That's my real critique. I know I talked about the rap music there, and that's more of a minor thing, but this is the thing that when it comes to me giving this a score out of 10, that certainly will knock it down a bit. But that's the critiques out of the way. Let's talk about the positives. And the positives, there's going to be a lot. And I mean a lot. Because this film, by the end, you know, after the 40-50 minutes are over, and once we get in, there's a scene, and you'll have seen in the trailer again, he kind of goes to this kind of booked out baseball ground. That's when the film takes off, and it doesn't stop. And from then, it's a brilliant film. It really is. It's only that first act that lets us down from being really, really top tier of this year of films for me. But let's talk about the things that I did love. And there's no other place to start than Austin Butler. Austin Butler, I said earlier, didn't know him, don't know who this guy is. But now, I will be amazed if he's not in the list of nominees for Best Actor at the Academy Awards next year. It's as simple as that. They were so quick to give it to Rami Malek, and don't get me wrong, Rami Malek certainly deserved it. But they were like, as soon as Bohemian Rhapsody came out, he was on that list of, okay, that's definitely, he's going to be there. Austin Butler has to be on that list. I'm not saying he should definitely win. We don't know what other performances there will be between now and then. But for me, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. His performance as Elvis is, I would say, better than Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody. Bohemian Rhapsody, I love the Queen music more than Elvis, and I have more of an attachment to that film for that reason, but that's not the film's fault. Because Elvis as a film is more of an emotional, it's like beautifully heartbreaking, this film. It's a film that I found enthralling once we got in. And my critiques aside about the first part, I love this by the end. It's very emotional. It's quite a visceral experience by the end. You know, when he's in these performances, the goosebumps, it's a wonderful telling of the story. And I'll admit, I'm not the best person to talk about this. I wasn't born in an era, as I'm sure a lot of you guys would be the same. We're not born in the era when Elvis was the main person. But if we talk to maybe our mothers and fathers, we talk to maybe our grandfathers and grandmothers, they would be able to give you, they'd give you an indication of if this is true to the character, true to the person as this character, or is it more of a parody of what Elvis is. So when I went to this film, I went with my mother, and after we'd finished and we were talking out in the car, and I was saying, so how much did they get right of that you remembered? And she told me that she had seen the comeback special that plays a big part in the film in the latter half, and she said that she's watched that in her life at least 20-30 times in its entirety. Something she loved growing up. As she got older, she still would watch that every so often. It's something that takes her back and really is nostalgic for her. And she said that was almost perfection, what Austin Butler and this movie was able to achieve in recreating that. And that reminded me of when we talked, I wasn't doing the channel at the time, but when Bohemian Rhapsody came out, and I suppose that's the best film to compare it to over the last wee while. When Bohemian Rhapsody came out and they had the Live Aid scene, you know, with Freddie Mercury, probably that most famous ever Queen performance, and one of the most famous live performances of all time, and how they recreated that to every minute detail, to Pepsi cans being turned the right way on the piano in that scene. I certainly have only just seen this film, so I don't know if I'll be able to watch it and see if it's to that level of detail, but I would imagine it's not far off. And overall, the performances by Austin Butler, I can't praise enough. The songs, the singing, I mean, I know I said about him singing these songs himself, I don't know if I'm fully convinced, because it's so good. And another performance, and we're talking about Academy Awards, and we talk about Tom Hanks a little bit. I've talked about him a good bit on my 5 of the Best series, where Tom Hanks is one of those great actors. And obviously he's maybe had his, if you like, prime time of acting. And now he's, well, you would assume he's starting to wind down on his career. Clearly not. Because Tom Hanks, as the Colonel in this film, I mean, he could be, I actually would be surprised if he's not up for Best Supporting Actor as well. Because his performance as the Colonel, I thought, was wonderful. Actually nearly as good as Austin Butler. The two of their chemistry, or sometimes lack thereof, in the film was just brilliant storytelling. And overall, I just think I got a lot of things that I loved, or I thought I would love coming into this film. I got a lot of things I knew I would love. And I suppose as we come to rating time, I do want to talk about one more thing, but when it does come to rating time, and certainly the first act will affect my rating, but that shouldn't really, because if you love the first act, and you probably love the film as an entirety, I maybe a little bit nitpicky when it comes to the first act, but for me it just it's my thought, it's how I feel about that, and that certainly will affect the score. But one more thing, and I know that I've read a few reviews about this film since seeing it, and obviously you've heard my critique, but something that I find a lot of people are critiquing it on, which seems to be quite a stylistic choice, which is Bahz Luhrmann as the director. And Bahz Luhrmann, I can't say I'm, he's not my favourite director or anything, but he's someone that, and something in this film that kind of gives it a stamp of its kind of originality, is these kind of expansive transition shots that are used frequently throughout the film. And I thought that they were actually quite a breath of fresh air, quite something different. But I would imagine when it comes to the divisive nature of people either loving or hating this film, and maybe a lot of people feel the same way I did about the first act, that's maybe where some people wouldn't absolutely love this film, or some people would just think it's okay. But before we get to rating time, I just want to finish on this point. And it was a point I brought up earlier. It was the music side of these films. Because of course, that's essentially the most important part. When I talked about Rocket Man and things like Crocodile Rock returned to the local charts and regained popularity. Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody regained popularity. Straight Outta Compton, a plethora of their songs became massive again, and certainly brought to a new generation, if you like. So for Elvis, is the music the best part of this? Undoubtedly. And it's as simple as that. Because I've talked about the performances. The performances are wonderful. The storytelling, especially for the latter half, is really top tier. But the music and the way it's integrated into the story, it doesn't feel like it's pandering. It doesn't feel like it's, we're just watching a stage performance and it's this song, this song, this song, this song, that's the end of the movie, bye-bye. It's well integrated. Each song, there's not many that you won't hear in here of the Elvis greats that you'll all know and love, I'm sure. They're all integrated into the story so well. There's not a part where it feels obnoxious that it's just thrown in there for no reason, or it's just had to be hammed into the story. They found a way to integrate it so well, and I suppose that's a credit to Bahz Luhrmann and the writers of this film. And I think just as a screenplay, it's a film that it achieved a lot. And while it won't be my favourite film of the year by any means, I can imagine it will be a lot of people's. And I will watch it again. I would imagine my score might change slightly, either up or slightly down, depending on how much I get stuck on the point of that first act. Maybe I come around on the first act and my score goes slightly up, or maybe I think it's even worse the second time and it goes down. We'll see. But let's get to rating time. As you can see, IMDb has gave it a kind of reasonable score, but probably you would class it as maybe a divisive score. That seems to be the word that's being thrown around for this film. I'm going to give Elvis an 8.5 out of 10. Because I feel that the latter half elevates this to such a standard. And I feel if the first act and the first kind of part of this film was equal to the second half, or this kind of second and third act, if you like, if it was all as good quality, I mean, we're talking an easy 9. Easy 9. But I just feel that was my real critique with the film. And I don't want you coming off this video to go, oh well, it wasn't good because of that first act. I would imagine I'll not be the only person that says that, but I would imagine a lot of people might prefer the first act, and maybe as it gets to the end it just depends on your preference, I suppose. But I think that Elvis is a film that, when I looked at the list of films coming out for 2022, I knew would be somewhere it would hopefully be somewhere up the list of my favourite films of the year. And while obviously if you've seen a few of the videos already, score-wise it's not top of the list, but it's also quite high. It's a film that I look forward to seeing again. It's a film I would certainly implore you to give a go yourself, whether you're an Elvis fan or if you're not an Elvis fan. And while I do love a lot of his songs, I'm not someone who's a die-hard Elvis fan. There's certainly artists in this world that I'm far bigger fans of than Elvis, but I'm certainly more of an Elvis fan coming out of this. And the story itself is again, what I said earlier, brilliantly heartbreaking is the best two words I can tell. It's an epic tale of kind of how famous someone can be, how perfect someone's life in the media can look, but on the realness and the real side of things, it's a sad one. And it's something that probably echoes through all of these music biopics. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Elvis. It's a film that I would implore all of you to give a go. I certainly can't wait to see it again. And yeah, Elvis is a film. I'll be honest, guys, when I said earlier about, or not that long ago, I was hoping this would be somewhere quite high on my list of favourite films of this year. And it certainly is up there, but there's films that have shocked me recently that I still do prefer and I think are better from start to finish. I think if this whole film was the quality of the second and third act, this could be... this is up there. This is up there. But, gotta be honest, it's my initial thoughts. I really, really hope you've enjoyed. As always, the fact you're sitting listening to me talk about movies, love you for it. If you want to stick around and subscribe, and there's so many films coming out. You know, I think we've got Thor in like a week or 2 weeks' time. We have a bundle of films coming out over the summer. There'll be initial thoughts for a lot of these videos. We've got the 5 of the best series ongoing, and whatever else is ongoing. So if you want to stick around, I would love you so much if you would hit that subscribe button. Leave a like, let me know you enjoyed, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find us is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.